good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice for radio, so today I'm going to be showing you a weird deck, ladies and gentlemen. It is a deck with 0 energy, 0 GXs, a budget deck if ever I've seen one, and yet it just won a Pokemon tournament over in Japan. It's awesome. It's Rotom. I love it. Let's have a gander, shall we? Now, the main attacker here is Rotom. Although there are a couple of backup attackers, Rotom and Rotom. You see, these are the Rotom that came around in Ultra Prism, and they all have the same ability. And the ability is that if you've got 9 Pokemon tools in the discard, or more, then you don't have to pay for the attacks of these Rotom. Now, this deck isn't playing all the Rotom. It doesn't need to play all of the Rotom. But this deck is very much built around that premise. I am going to get 9 Pokemon tools in the discard. And I am going to attack for 0 energy. And there's very little that you can actually do about it. So, the main attacker here is... well, it's Rotom. Now, this is the Psychic Rotom, just called Rotom. Now, the ability we've talked about, the attack, 120 damage for free Psychic Energy, and this Pokemon cannot attack during your next turn. Now, it does have a retreat cost of 1, but we're going to look at Escape Board in a minute, so that's fine. Because obviously, if you've got no energy, there will be no manual retreating here. You cannot pay a retreat cost if you don't have any energy. And this is your main attack. You're hitting weakness against Buzzwole. You're hitting weakness against stuff like Espeon or Necrozma. But even with that aside, you had a choice band, you're up to 150. And clearly, this is a deck that is going to be using Shrine of Punishment to put 1 damage counter on each Pokemon EX and GX between turns. So essentially here, you're one-hit KOing stuff like Buzzwole. And time you add Choice Band and Shrine of Punishment, even if you're not one-hit KOing, you should be taking a fair amount of KOs. But we do have a secondary attacker here, which helps out very nicely indeed. It's Fan Rotom, same ability, attacks for free if you've got 9 tools in the discard. Free colourless energy, but obviously 0 for us. This attack does 20 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. Well, hang on a second. Isn't that just Tapu Koko? The answer is yes, but Tapu Koko needs a double colourless energy. This does not need any energy once you've got 9 tools in the discard. It also has free retreat, which is a wonderful bonus, but it is nothing more than a bonus. The whole point of this Rotom is quite simply, I know that regular Rotom does not always do enough damage. Sometimes the attacks are going to be a bit short. So in some games, I'm going to need to spread a bit of damage around with Fan Rotom, and then I can bring in Choice Band and Shrine of Punishment, and I will be one-hit KOing. Plus, against non-GXs like Shining Lugia, for instance, 120 won't be enough, Choice Band won't work, Shrine of Punishment won't work. So you're going to need to use Fan Rotom here to spread 20 to all of them, so then you can start getting one-hit KOs using your Rotom. Sounds good. And the tertiary attacker here is Rotom. Frost Rotom, as it happens. Now, Frost Rotom here again, same ability, 0 energy, 10 damage plus 20 for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, I suppose this does help you to hit for another weakness, though very little relevant stuff is weak to water at the moment. Although over in Japan they do have both Blacephalon and Makago, which are seeing quite a lot of play and quite a lot of success. But really any deck, even something like a Malamar deck that just attaches too much energy, you can be like, ha, that was silly, and take advantage of it. We're not playing Wash Rotom because Wash Rotom kind of sucks. And the reason we're going for Psychic Rotom rather than the, well, frankly, identical Lightning Rotom is very simply because you hit a better weakness on stuff like Buzzwole, and you're not weak to fighting. Weak to fighting is very, very bad. Better typing, better weakness, that's why we go for the Psychic. Although I should mention this was actually in Forbidden Light, whereas all the rest were in Ultra Prism. Now there are some supporting Pokemon here, and they're just to help you get rolling. Principally here we've got Zebstrika. Now Zebstrika hasn't actually been released yet, but it is going to be released in Lost Thunder. And it's all about the ability here. Once during your turn you may discard your hand and draw 4 cards. Great for draw power, but clearly here what you really want to do is just discard all the tools. This deck essentially has no play until you've got 9 tools in the discard. Therefore, you've got to get 9 tools in the discard as fast as you possibly can. Zebstrika helps out. The retreat cost sucks because you're a bench sitter, but remember, escape board got yo back. And then there's a couple of Marshadow. Again, this deck has no play until you get 9 tools in the discard. What does Marshadow do? Marshadow slows your opponent down. Marshadow stops your opponent getting set up by giving you both a hand of 4 cards. And also, if you've got Zebstrika out, Marshadow really doesn't worry you that much. So here it's really just about slowing your opponent down, because if they get rolling too fast, you're probably going to end up losing. Now we can skip over the energy section of this deck, what with the whole 0 energy, and really here it's all about the tools that we're playing. And we need to get 16 in the discard, but we do want to use some of these as well, so let's play 16 tools here, shall we? Now, obviously, we've got 4 Choice Band. They do an extra 30 damage to EXs and GXs. That's quite nice. But we also see 4 Choice Helmet here, which means you take 30 damage less from EXs and GXs. Like I've said, one of the biggest difficulties of playing this deck is going to be deciding which tools to bin and which tools to keep. Obviously, these are both going to be really useful if you come against a heavy EX or GX deck. But the reality is you're going to have to bin the majority of these 16 tools. Although as a side note, right, as soon as you binned 9 of them, you're fine. And also, oftentimes you'll be binning them, just the ones you find first, rather than particularly choosing which ones to bin. We've got 4 escape board, like we've said. Nothing in this deck has a retreat cost of more than 1. Everything has a retreat cost of 1 except Fan Rotom, which is free. So escape board gives everything free retreat. And then we see 4 copies of Spell Tag here, which is a great little tool card, whereby if a Pokemon, a psychic Pokemon, to which it is attached gets KO'd, you get to put 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. First of all, this is another reason why we would play this Rotom over the Lightning one. There is actually another reason, we'll get to that in a moment. And it means you get a bit of extra damage, which, as I've said, there will be times where your damage output is just a little bit lower than you would ideally like. We also see here Adventure Bag. An Adventure Bag is a stunningly useful item in this deck, so it's a 4 of, and it allows you to search your deck for 2 tools and put them in your hand. Now, this could be used when you're attacking to search out the perfect tools, but actually here, this means you can search out the ones you want to bin, and you can actually choose which ones you're discarding with something like Zebstrika. I mean, if you can use Adventure Bag to search out a couple of tools right before you discard with Zebstrika, that's going to be very, very useful indeed. And the rest of this deck really is just built around getting your tools in the discard. So if we look at your Pokemon search here, what do we find? 4 Ultra Ball, discard 2 cards and search for a Pokemon. 3 Mysterious Treasure, discard 1 card from your hand, search for a Psychic or Dragon Pokemon. Now, you'll often be wanting Rotom as your main attacker, Marshadow in the early game to disrupt, or maybe even in the late game to disrupt. Either way, its search is enough. Both of these allow you to discard cards from your hand. Maybe you've drawn into a tool, and given that your deck is more than 1/4 tools, you should have. Or maybe you played an Adventure Bag. Either way, very useful. If we look at your supporter cards here again, it's very, very, very bin some tools. TV Reporter, draw 3 cards, then discard a card from your hand. If you have no cards in your deck, you can play this card. This is incredibly useful because you draw 3 cards first, then you discard a card from your hand. So if you don't have a tool ready to discard now, hopefully you draw one with TV Reporter and then discard it. But the better supporter here is Sightseer. This is a phenomenal card which we were not hyping, but has come around in so many of the decks we've been looking at on this channel lately. Draw until you have 5 cards in hand, Before drawing, you may discard as many cards from your hand as you like. So maybe you just use it to bin your entire hand and draw 5 new cards before playing Zebstrika to discard them again. Or maybe you've got 3 or 4 tools in hand and then you discard them. If you play something like Adventure Bag, you can have 6 or 7 tools in hand and discard all of them with Sightseer. It's phenomenal in this deck, and I just want to make a point of saying how often this has come around. We also see free Acrobike here. It's good just as item draw, but also you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, draw 1, discard 1. Clearly you're trying to discard tools from your hand, but discarding tools from the top of your deck will do nicely as well. And then the last couple cards in this deck are fairly standard. We see 4 Rescue Stretcher here. Partly this is so you can recover these Rotom when you need them, but partly this deck is super heavy on discard. Between Zebstrika and Ultra Ball and Sightseer and all of that, you're going to end up discarding Pokemon you don't want to, so playing 4 Rescue Stretcher helps you to recover from that. We see 2 Guzma because you need to pick Pokemon off the bench and KO them. And then 3 Shrine of Punishment, we've mentioned that a few times. This is a great deck. Yes, you're not doing quite as much damage as you should with Rotom, but between Choice Band, Spell Tag, Fan Rotom, and Shrine of Punishment, you're doing a whole bunch of extra damage here. And in terms of discarding, you've got Zebstrika, you've got Ultra Ball, you've got Mysterious Treasure, you've got TV Reporter, you've got Sightseer, you've got Acrobike. Nobody can say this deck was not built very, very specifically to do the thing it did. It's a very linear deck, except the sequencing here is a nightmare. But once you've got it rolling, it is great. The one thing I will say, if your opponent gets an Alolan Muck out, that turns off your abilities and you've got no energy at all here. So if your opponent drops an Alolan Muck, you lose. Like, instantly. But other than that, very, very fun deck. Okay, I suppose you can maybe get a KO using Spell Tag or Shrine of Punishment, but this is not going to work, ladies and gentlemen. It's just really not going to work. And as for the Psychic Rotom over the Lightning Rotom, well, I mean, it's better typing, better weakness, and you can use Spell Tag, and you can use Mysterious Treasure. I think it's fair to say it's a much better option. I love this deck. I love that it's cheap. I love that it doesn't involve GXs. I love that it doesn't play any energy. I love that it's weird. But do you love it? I'd love to know. So let me know in the comment section, ladies and gentlemen. Go nuts, but please do remember the rule. Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do that, and you can also get yourself some bonus podcasts every week. Oh yeah, and do check out youtube.com/WasiPlays. We are getting deep into the Transformers TCG at the moment. It's awesome. I've made a how to play video, I've made a how to build decks video, and I'm profiling a whole bunch of the cards, so head on over and check it out. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.